There comes a time in your life when the silence gets louder than the noise, when the world stops clapping and you're left with just you. And in that moment, it either breaks you or builds a fire so fierce inside you that the world starts watching again. Let me tell you something nobody else will. Being alone isn't weakness. It's the purest form of power. The world trains you to fear solitude because they know what happens when a person truly finds themselves. Alone you stop pretending. Alone you face the demons. Alone you sharpen your mind like a blade. It's not isolation, it's transformation. Every second without applause, every moment without validation is the universe daring you to rise on your own terms. And when you do, no one can ever control you again. The strongest men you'll ever meet are forged in solitude, not surrounded by praise. Be the one who thrives in silence, who grows in shadows, who walks alone, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. Stop craving company that slows you down. Embrace the quiet, build in it, become unstoppable in it. There's a brutal honesty that lives in solitude, an honesty most people spend their entire lives running from. When you're alone, there's no one to impress, no one to perform for, no one to pretend in front of. It strips away the layers you've built to fit in, to be liked, to be accepted. In solitude, your reflection becomes clear. Not the version you show the world, but the version you've buried under distractions, relationships, noise, and validation. The masks come off, not because you want them to, but because there's no one left to wear them for. You see yourself exactly as you are, with every insecurity, every lie you've told yourself, every weakness you've ignored, and every ounce of potential you've denied. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, and that's where the transformation begins. People fear being alone because they fear the truth. It's easy to stay surrounded by others and lose yourself in their opinions, their judgments, their expectations. You start living for them, chasing their applause, their approval. But when you're alone, all that disappears, and what's left? Just you. Your thoughts, your patterns, your mistakes, your dreams, your demons. It's in that solitude that you realize how much of your life has been scripted by everything but your true self. Solitude forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. That bitterness you carry, that jealousy you hide, that laziness you justify, it all rises to the surface. There's nowhere to hide it anymore. And that's not weakness. That's the start of strength, because you cannot fix what you refuse to face. And in the stillness, you begin to face it all. You start to understand your pain. You start to trace the roots of your anger. You hear the voice of your inner child, the one that got silenced by the chaos of the world. You begin to heal. And real healing isn't gentle. It's violent. It rips through you. It makes you question who you are. And then it rebuilds you with truth as your foundation. But it's not just about pain. Solitude reveals your greatness too. In the quiet, you start to dream again. Not the safe dreams you share on social media, but the dangerous ones, the bold ones, the ones that scare you because they feel too real. You rediscover your voice. You remember the fire you had before the world poured water on it. You realize how powerful your mind is when it's not distracted, how focused you can be when you're not constantly trying to please. You start to enjoy your own company, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And from that reality, confidence grows, not the loud, arrogant kind that crumbles under pressure, but the quiet, unshakable kind that only comes from truly knowing yourself. You walk differently. You speak differently. You stop settling. You stop chasing. Because when you've looked your true self in the eyes and made peace with it, the opinions of others become noise. You're no longer desperate for attention. You no longer need permission to exist, to succeed, to evolve. You become dangerous in the best way, because the person who is comfortable in solitude, who is not afraid to be alone, cannot be controlled. They can't be manipulated by fear of rejection or loneliness. They don't chase toxic love, they don't beg for acceptance, and they sure as hell don't need validation from the world. They become their own source of strength, clarity, and purpose. That's why solitude is not a punishment, it's a blessing, but only if you have the courage to lean into it. It will hurt. It will expose you, but it will also free you, because when all the masks fall and only your truth remains, that's when you finally understand what real power looks like. And from that moment on, you stop surviving and you start living, raw and real, exactly as you were meant to. Being alone forces growth, discipline, and clarity in a way nothing else ever will. When you strip away the noise of the world, the distractions, the conversations, the opinions, the judgments, you're left with one thing. You. Just you. That solitude becomes the mirror no one wants to look into because it doesn't lie. It shows you exactly who you are, without filters, without excuses, without the comforting lies you've been telling yourself to stay safe, to stay small. And in that silence, a decision is made. Either you face what's there and rise, or you keep running in circles, looking for others to save you from yourself. Growth doesn't happen when you're surrounded by comfort. Growth is the result of pressure, discomfort, and reflection. When you're alone, you have no choice but to feel everything. The sadness you've ignored, the anger you've buried, the dreams you've silenced. It all comes crashing in, not to break you, but to awaken you. You finally see how much of your life has been lived on autopilot. How many of your choices were made to avoid being judged, to keep others happy, to fit into boxes you were never meant to be in. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's the beginning of real growth. Because now you're not moving based on what others expect. You're building something from within, something real, something solid. Discipline is born in the absence of accountability. When no one is watching, when no one's clapping for your progress, when no one's holding your hand, reminding you to stay focused, that's where discipline becomes a necessity, not an option. Being alone means you are your own motivator, your own critic, your own coach. You either get up and put in the work or you don't. And when you don't, the consequences are immediate. No one is coming to save you. No one is checking in. So what do? You build routines, you make promises to yourself, and you start keeping them. You go to the gym when you don't feel like it. You work on your goals when it's easier to scroll or sleep. And with every silent victory, your confidence grows. Not because someone told you you're great, but because you know you've earned it. That self-trust becomes unshakable. That's the foundation of unstoppable discipline. Clarity is perhaps the greatest gift of solitude. The world is full of noise. People telling you who to be, what to do, what success looks like. And when you're constantly in that noise, you start to believe it. You chase goals that aren't yours. You pursue relationships that don't serve you. You try to live a life that doesn't even feel like yours. But when you're alone long enough and honest enough, the fog starts to lift. You begin to hear your own voice again, the voice that knows what you want, the voice that's been drowned out by expectations and opinions. In that clarity, everything becomes simpler. You stop asking for permission. You stop explaining your path. You get real about what matters and ruthless about what doesn't. Being alone strips away the distractions and brings your life into focus. You realize how much time you've wasted giving energy to things that were never aligned with your purpose. You start cutting people off, not out of bitterness, but because peace has become more important than pleasing. You simplify your life, and in that simplicity, your power multiplies. You think clearer, move faster, and act with intention. You're no longer reactive, you're strategic. You're no longer emotional about every setback. You're focused. Solitude teaches you how to think instead of just feel, how to plan instead of just wish, how to execute instead of just dream. There's a certain level of greatness that only reveals itself in isolation. When you're no longer relying on external motivation, when your actions are no longer performative but deeply intentional, that's when you're dangerous. Not to others, but to the limitations you once believed. You become the kind of person who doesn't fold under pressure because you've already fought battles in the dark and won. You've already conquered the voice that said you're not enough. And because of that, you move with quiet confidence, not needing to prove anything, just building, growing, evolving. Solitude is not the absence of connection, it's the presence of self. When you embrace it, not as punishment, but as preparation, it changes everything. You don't just grow, you ascend. You don't just become better, you become unbreakable. Power belongs to those who don't fear walking the path alone. Not because they want to be alone, not because they hate the world, but because they've realized something most people never will. The path to greatness, the path to truth, the path to purpose is often walked in silence, without hand-holding, without applause, and without comfort. The ones who rise to the top are the ones who dared to move when nobody believed in them, when nobody understood them, when everybody questioned why they were doing what they were doing, and still they kept walking because they knew the destination mattered more than the validation. Most people spend their lives in crowds. Crowds feel safe, crowds agree with you, laugh with you, distract you, but crowds also slow you down. They keep you average. They keep you thinking like everyone else, moving like everyone else, living like everyone else, and the moment you decide you want more, not just money or fame, but freedom, clarity, purpose, you'll find yourself stepping away from the crowd. And that's when the real journey begins. That's when you realize the walk gets quiet, the nights get longer, and the doubts get louder. But if you keep walking, that's when you become powerful. There's a strength that's built in isolation that cannot be replicated in comfort. When you're walking alone, there's no one to lean on, no one to pass the blame to, no one to clean up your mess. You are responsible for every choice, every failure, every result. And in that weight, you grow. You stop waiting for someone to come fix your life. You stop complaining about what you don't have. You start using what you do have, your time, your mind, your energy. You start showing up differently, not for the world, but for yourself, because you've realized that everything you need is already within you. It just needed space to rise. When you're alone, you discover how loud your inner voice truly is. Not the voice that doubts you, but the one that knows who you are. The one that's been silenced by distractions, ignored by busyness, buried under opinions. In solitude, that voice gets stronger. It tells you to keep going when everything feels uncertain. It tells you to trust the process when the results haven't shown up yet. It reminds you that you weren't built to fit in. You were built to stand out, to lead, to inspire, to build something so real that it doesn't need to be explained. And that kind of power doesn't come from being surrounded. It comes from being solid within. Walking alone also forces you to build standards. When you're not desperate for company, you stop tolerating mediocrity. You stop letting weak people waste your time. You stop pretending, stop chasing fake friendships, stop settling in relationships that drain you. You become selective, not because you think you're better, but because you finally value your energy. You understand that every second of your time is an investment, and not everyone deserves access to it. That's power. The ability to say no, the ability to walk away, the ability to be alone and not feel empty, but full of purpose, direction, and self-respect. People who fear walking alone often end up following paths that were never meant for them. They live lives built on borrowed dreams and secondhand opinions. They look around for permission instead of listening to their own calling. But those who walk alone, they lead, they create, they become. They don't need maps because they trust their instincts. They don't wait for motivation because they've developed discipline. They don't look back because they know what's ahead is far more valuable than anything they left behind. And when the world finally sees what they've built in silence, it looks like magic. But it wasn't magic. It was war, internal war, fought and won in silence. There is nothing more dangerous than a man or woman who has mastered the art of walking alone. They are unshakable because they've seen who they are without the masks. They are focused because they burn distractions to the ground. They are driven because they've had to generate their own fire when no one else believed in them. That's where real power comes from. Not from being liked, not from being surrounded, but from being rooted in something deeper. Conviction, resilience, purpose. So if the path you're on feels lonely, good. That means it's yours. That means you're not copying someone else's life. That means you're forging your own. Keep walking. Let others doubt you. Let the crowd laugh. Let them misunderstand you. Because one day, the same people who couldn't see your vision will ask how you did it. And you'll smile, not because you proved them wrong, but because you proved yourself right. And in the end, when you've walked that long, lonely path, when the noise has faded and the crowd is nowhere in sight, you'll finally understand why it had to be that way. The pain, the silence, the solitude, it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It shaped you, sharpened you, built you into something unbreakable. You didn't just survive being alone, you thrived in it. You created discipline from emptiness, clarity from chaos, strength from silence. And now you don't need the world to validate you. You don't need anyone to hold your hand. You walk with your own fire, your own standards, your own truth. That's the kind of power no one can take from you. Because it wasn't given, it was earned. So if you're still in the dark, still walking that lonely road, keep going. Don't beg for company. Don't crave applause. Let your journey stay yours, because when the dust settles and the world finally turns its eyes to you, you won't need their praise. You'll already know who you are. And that kind of power, that's rare. That's real. That's the reward of walking alone.